Okay. Hey everybody, and welcome to vFORUMOnline 2020 Greece. I'm Oren Pencil, and I'm a technical leader for emerging technologies in the Modern Application Platforms business unit. I'm going to go over in the next 15 minutes around how do you modernize your application supply chain, of course with VMware Tanzu, and why does it important? So let's start with the why customers want to modernize their supply chain and they drive into the digital transformation of their applications. So the obvious reason is the world is changing and other companies are shifting gears and pushing production products faster to their customers. And as a company, we need to be competitive. We need to play in that competitive landscape, and we need to have new revenue generated channels. We need to bring more innovation in the development side, like development languages, or other tool sets and tool chains. And we need to manage all of those different components. And we need to do that fast because we need to move faster from idea to production. We need to bring our value as the IT to the business side that demands to the velocity of those different products and different versions of the products. So 78% of the CIOs says it's the #1 priority, modernize the supply chain, getting that idea to production as fast as they can. Now, from the other end, 48% of those CIOs didn't do anything to improve that in the last year. Why? Do you know, like, there's a huge gap between what should be done and is being done basically in a day-to-day. The reason for that is there's a really hard work in alignment between the supply chain of the application and the supply chain of the infrastructure. The alignment between everything, every component together to bring like a single holistic supply chain is really difficult. There's two forces that clashes in one another. One is the application side and the other is the infrastructure side. The application represent the business line owners and the DevOps engineers that needs to basically bring that velocity of versions and push the code as fast as they can to the production. And from the other end, the infrastructure has its own mechanisms, tool sets, regulations, processes, and everything else they need to take care of. And, you know, security, availability, reliability, and everything else. And those two things doesn't work together. And eventually they do, but it's just taking a long time to align those two parts together. And of course, when you get into a multi-cluster, multi-cloud environment where you have different clouds, that's even harder. And the reason you will probably gotta use different clouds is because different public clouds gives you different unique capabilities and that you're probably gonna leverage as part of your application and business plan. So we think in VMware that the bridge to basically connect those two dots, the infrastructure and the development, is Kubernetes. We think that Kubernetes is the ultimate API layer, the highest abstraction of API that will basically connect the dots and bring you a streamlined API for the supply chain of the application. That means that it's not just using Kubernetes to abstract your infrastructure, it's also using Kubernetes to abstract your development. So Kubernetes down and Kubernetes up. Everything will be managed and basically interact with the same API, with the same tool sets, the same language, and the same way of doing things. And to do that, we need to incorporate a supply chain portfolio that has every aspect of that, that supply chain. So not just how to run Kubernetes and how to operate and how to manage and secure that, but also how do you develop on that and how do you leverage Kubernetes to create new structures and new objects and new mechanisms in your own environment. That's why the Tanzu portfolio is not just one part of that. It's a portfolio of product with 3 main pillars: the build, the run, and the manage. Everything inside the Tanzu is built on open source and aligned with the open source community. That's the first thing about Tanzu. We are aligning with the community, we are contributing to the community, and we are investing in the community. So we are the second largest contributor to Kubernetes because of different investment that we made in the last 3 years. And we are leading or co-leading 9 out of 13 SIGs of Kubernetes. But it's not just that. We acquired Bitnami as well, and Bitnami is all about open source projects and toolsets, and how do you leverage that as part of that supply chain of the application. And of course, last but not least, we also acquired Pivotal. Pivotal was doing application modernization in our customers for the last 7 years. Not a lot of people know that Pivotal was a spin out of VMware. So it was part of VMware initially, got out, modernized our customers' environment, and now we brought them in to form that build part of the Tanzu portfolio. So if I'm addressing that portfolio in different layers, it's also representing our abstraction layers. And the abstraction layers is basically 3 of them. First is, how do you abstract your infrastructure? In that run pillar, there's 2 main layers. One is, how do I make more advantage of my current environment? I have vSphere environment, and I need to expose new services on my current environment. So vSphere has now the capability to run Kubernetes as part of it. One-to-one with the vCenter cluster, you have a Kubernetes cluster that we call a supervisor cluster. And that Kubernetes cluster is the foundation for everything. It can run pods directly on it. It can run VMs directly on it. And of course, it can run clusters on it. And when I'm saying cluster, I'm saying the second layer of abstraction. Once I did that and I've enabled my Kubernetes cluster on vSphere, that's not enough, because I want to have a ubiquitous Kubernetes layer across different infrastructure providers. We just said that we will probably gonna make an advantage from unique capabilities of public clouds. So we need that consistent Kubernetes layer across any cloud and any infrastructure provider. That's Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. So Tanzu Kubernetes Grid will allow us to use Kubernetes to manage Kubernetes. It's based on open source toolsets. Cluster API is the lifecycle management engine that came out of the Kubernetes community to manage Kubernetes clusters. Just like you're creating an application, you can now create a Kubernetes cluster. And if something goes wrong with that Kubernetes cluster, Kubernetes will make sure it's going to be self-healing itself. And it's not just that. It's not just the lifecycle management. Everything about Tanzu Kubernetes Grid is open source to get that consistency. We can't be dependent on VMware or vSphere environment when we go and run that Kubernetes cluster on AWS, Azure, or GCP. So that Tanzu Kubernetes Grid will ship with Prometheus, Grafana, Contour for layer 7 ingress controller, Velero for backup and restore, and as I said, Cluster API as the lifecycle management engine. And that ubiquitous Kubernetes layer will allow us to manage in a single way every Kubernetes that we will manage. In a single way we can create that, in a single way we can manage that. Now, the second layer of abstraction, I have that ubiquitous Kubernetes layer. I'm using the same kube control API across any infrastructure provider. Now I can develop and be based on that. So in that development cycle, in that build part, we have, again, 2 layers. One is the application platform, or the tool sets and technology that will allow us to ship our ideas into production as fast as we can. In that landscape, we have the Tanzu build service that is basically doing the CI, the continuous integration. So how do I detect my code, compile my code, create a container image with the dependencies and everything I need, and then ship that into my registry, and just to be able to pull that when I'm deploying into Kubernetes. From the other end, if I'm not just doing the CD and I want the full experience of the developer, I want an application platform that will handle not just the CI, but also the CD part and do everything for me, I can use Tanzu Application Service for Kubernetes. Tanzu Application Service for Kubernetes is our crown jewel. It's taking the Cloud Foundry application platform and ship that on Kubernetes. It's basically taking the CI of the Tanzu build service and adding a CD of the deployment of the application, and also in that platform, managing everything with a service mesh, Easter service mesh, and be based on the Tanzu application catalog and the Bitnami sources. We can also add a marketplace where we can add backend services like Redis or Postgres or any other backend service that we need, and everything as part of that shipment of the code. So it's a CF experience, a push experience where I'm just pushing the code as a developer, and the platform is making everything for me up to the running workload that is exposed to my customer. The second layer is the development layer, and there we are keeping our investment in the Spring framework with everything that comes with it, all the investment and the services, consultancy, and support, of course, in that development landscape. And the last part, or the last pillar, is the managed pillar. In the managed pillar, again, we understand that we will probably gonna use different Kubernetes clusters on different clouds, and that's why we need services that will manage across the board any fleet of Kubernetes clusters. In that managed part, we have three main services. One of them is the Tanzu Mission Control, and Tanzu Mission Control is a single point of management to the entire Kubernetes cluster that we have. You can either provision cluster from Tanzu Mission Control or attach any conformant Kubernetes cluster for that Tanzu Mission Control. When you're attaching that cluster into Tanzu Mission Control, you will gain the capabilities of identity management, policy management, data protection, conformancy test, and other capabilities like policies, OPA policies, and others, but it's going to be consistent. And you can apply that on a group of clusters that basically represent different Kubernetes clusters on different clouds, and it's still going to be consistent and be applied directly the same. Second thing is Tanzu Service Mesh. Tanzu Service Mesh will allow you to basically connect dots between any object that you have in your environment, Kubernetes or not Kubernetes, under the same mesh, under the same layer 7 networking mesh. And that will allow you to encrypt everything, being securely connected between different Kubernetes clusters, address those different endpoints in a single networking where you have a service discovery, observability, and of course, connectivity. So you can actually refer between two services in different clusters just to lift and shift your application or connect the dots between different Kubernetes clusters. And of course, you can also add different meshes. So it's not just our Tanzu Service Mesh, it's also connecting into other meshes to create a single mesh if you want. So Anthos and HashiCorp Console. Third service in that managed landscape is observability. And observability was known as Wavefront, is another acquisition that we've made. And observability will bring you a dashboard of everything you need to know about your environment. It's not just your Kubernetes environment, it's also the physical, virtual, application platforms and application, everything in a single dashboard with more than 200 integrations with a single click, 10 minutes configuration, where you have everything digested into one dashboard. Everything inside the managed will be integrated inside Tanzu Mission Control. So from a single dashboard, from a single control point, you can see the service mesh configuration and service discovery. You can open a dashboard of observability. And of course, you can do everything that Tanzu Mission Control does itself. Last but not least, Pivotal Labs. Pivotal Labs stayed the same. It's the most robust services and consultancy that we have for the modernization of the application. It's coming with you, sitting down with the customer, modernizing the application, modernizing the code, understanding what do you need to follow. Is it refactor? Is it replace? Is it replatform and anything else? And basically helping you choose the right way to modernize the applications and the business that you're in. So that's the Pivotal Labs. Now, that's the Tanzu portfolio. The Tanzu portfolio is everything you need from the bottom up around the modernization of the application. You don't have to use everything. Everything is about the freedom of choice. It's abstracted between the layers. You can pick and choose part of that or a bundle of that. There's new bundles that we have just exposed as basic, standard, advanced, and enterprise. Inside of that, there's mix and match between the bottom run part of Tanzu, the build, and of course, the managing inside of those as well. And last but not least, why should you do that? So you should do that because you need that. You need that competitive advantage. You need to go faster into production. You need to have that idea to production and supply chain to basically ship your code as fast as you can. And that Kubernetes way of doing things and that common ground of Kubernetes is a single API to create the streamline of everything from the infrastructure to the application. And of course, with the management, will allow you to gain the most versatile environment to achieve those goals. So you see what our customer says that they got 82% more software in production, 5x less time in debugging and patching, and 78% increase in operation efficiency. And that's a lot, and that means a lot for our customers. I want to thank you for the time that you took for visiting that presentation. And I want to ask you to open up Tanzu in Google and Cube Academy, that is an open academy for Kubernetes that we are publishing as part of our VMware consultancy services. Thank you for being here today with me, and have a great day. אין לי מושג מה השעה, אני עפתי בזה, נראה לי שזה יותר מדי.